spoke yesterday, and I think it's a very important just to chazer over right before we start that the Rav Zimner Rebbe's approach to the whole Techeles was from Chazal. He went through Chazal, he learned Chazal, he came out with 11 simonim according to Chazal, and with that in mind, he had no pre-existing notion, no agenda, no fact that he already established. He was able to do it without negias. He went down and he found something that he felt matched all the simonim with Chazal, the cuttlefish. Once a person has an agenda, he has already, I put something on the table and I say, this is a fact. Somebody could ask many kashas on that. You'll be matre every one of those kashas, bikash, because it's already a fact by you. It's almost like once something is becheskas, certain matziv, you have to be a moitzi. You have to really take it out of the situation in order to slug it up. Otherwise, it's an actual fact, and any kashas you have on it, either okay, it's a kasha, or you could be matche, even if the dichoy is a very, very weak dichoy. So therefore, you have to understand that the connection between the murex and the chilazon is not a very strong connection to begin with. We'll see there are rayas to it, there are many rayas, but it started off, it was put on the table by somebody we said didn't know halacha, it wasn't from halacha, it's not from Chazal, there's no paiskim, no bonim. It's a guy who had zero yediyas when it came to anything that in the Torah. In the beginning of the 1980s, there were two chemists. I don't think they were from. One of them's name was Otto Eisner. He was from the Schenker College of Fibers. And there's another one by the name of Ehud Spanier from the University of Haifa. And they were experimenting with the snail, with the murex, with all the snails that produce dye. And like many discoveries and inventions, they discovered by mistake. Supposedly it was by mistake. And they came through with a tremendous breakthrough. And that is that if you expose wool that was dipped into dye in its reduced state, and you expose that to the sun, then it turns blue. Now what does that mean? Now again, I'm not a specialist when it comes to pigmentation. I'm not a dye chemist. I'm not nothing. I'm not a scientist, nothing. I'm just going to tell you over the way I understand what happens. When you take out the murex, when you have the murex trunkless, the secretion, not blood, but it's a secretion, a liquid that comes out, that you get it, it's not the lifeline blood. It's a separate gland that's called the hypobronchial gland. It's located right above the lungs of this snail. And when you cut off that gland, in that gland, there's going to be a very little, but there's going to be some secretion, some liquid, and it's with that secretion, when it's in the snail, it's clear. It's clearish, like mucus color, and when you take it out, it gets exposed to the oxygen, to the air, and it starts turning very quickly, like darker and darker and darker, until it's very, very dark. Blue, almost dark purple. If you wait a few hours, it's already black. Now, when you take that dye and you try to put it into a baguette and dip wool into it, it's not gonna fasten. It's not gonna penetrate the wool well. Because of the way the molecule makeup of this dye, it's very tight and it won't go in. It will go in, it will come right out, it will wash right out. It's really not adhering to the wool. This is a problem that they knew in the time of Chazal. Chazal knew that when you do vat dyes, this type of dye is called vat dye. When you do vat dyes, you have to make it soluble, water soluble. You have to make it connected with, you have to basically break apart the molecules so that the molecules, when they're broken apart, then they're able to go into the baguette very deep, penetrate, and that's the way it will dye a beged. So the way you do it is you mix the dye. In the time of Chazal, they had it in a different, the same mahalach, they were looking for the same chemicals, but they didn't have these chemicals themselves. They had it through different meraglayim, different things we'll see. But basically, what you're looking to do is you're mixing it with chemicals, this dye, and the chemicals, when you heat it up, is going to pull out all the oxygen that's inside this dye. And when you take out the oxygen, it breaks apart the molecules, and it puts the dye, which was very dark, it puts it into its glucose state. It's called white state. That means when you cook it up with these chemicals, and these chemicals are going to draw out the oxygen, so the molecule makeup is going to break apart, and instead of being dark now, because of the way they were connected, the chemicals when they're connected, the molecules when they're connected, they have a certain color, they're going to break apart, and when you break apart this dye, it turns clear. When it's in that clear state, then it's very absorbent into wool. Once it's absorbed in that state, that's called reduction. You're reducing the dye, it's called a reduction, its reduction state is this clear state. At that point, when you dip in the wool, it will absorb very strong into the wool, and as soon as you take it out of the vat, what you're doing is you're exposing it to oxygen, you're exposing it to the air, and so then the molecules bond back to each other again, and they'll turn purple again, turn whatever color they were originally, they will go back and bond and turn into that color, except that now they're in the beged, they're solid in the beged, and now you can't even wash it off. It's very, very strong, fastened, adherent to this beged. And the lashon that they say is, afim murak v'shutaf b'bleach. Even if your mamish clean it with bleach, it's going to stay very strong. And that's because it already went inside because of the reduction that was done to it, and then you put this wool. This is what they realized. They realized this by mistake, because when they were dealing with this murex or all the snails, it's like no different than anything. They say it's a lot worse than working in a fish market. And it smells gefahrlich when you do it. Snails are like fish, and they decompose and they smell. So what he did was he took it to the window, he took it outside, and he did it. Now, I'm sorry, what we said until now, that's done indoors, and it might even have to be done indoors. Now, what they realized is that when the wool has the dye in it, in its reduced state, which means in its clear state, when it's penetrating into the wool, if you immediately take it to the sun and expose it to the ultraviolet rays, what's going to happen is, a very interesting thing is, the color that's in the snail is called bromo indigo. It's bromo indigo, which means you have bromo, which is the red, and you have the indigo, which is the blue. It's two different parts of the molecules. One produces the red color, bromo, and there's indigo, which is the blue color, and they mix together and they produce a purple color. And that's why a lot of the issue, Rabbi Herzog addresses it in many, that it turns purple, it's not blue. And what they noticed is that if in its reduced state you take this wool and you expose it to ultraviolet rays before it turns black with the oxygen, as it's pulling it out of the vat, and you expose it to the rays of the sun, that rays breaks the bonds between the bromin, and the indigo and the blue. So you're getting rid, and what it does is it like sort of dissolves the red, it dissolves the bromin, and that goes away, and you're left afterwards with only the indigo. Indigo is perfectly pure blue, and that's what happens. So if you expose the wool to the sun in its reduced state, you're going to break the bonds between the red and between the blue, and the bromin is going to go away, and it's going to stay like that afterwards, and it's going to be perfectly pure blue. This is the hamtzah. This is what they found. Apparently it was by mistake, but they came out with this secret, and this was megala to them. Now they didn't even have anything to do, I don't think, with tzitzis, but this was a discovery that was done in the early 80s. Later on in the 80s, in 85 and 86, there was a fellow, Rabbi Leo Tavger, a younger man, who was very into tzitzis, and he heard about this hamtzah, this thing that they came up with, and he felt that now is the time that you should apply it to tzitzis. So if we have the chilazon, which some say that this was the chilazon, and one of the problems, and one of the many problems was that it can't be blue. So if now we figured out the secret and we discovered how to produce blue from it, so now we could start doing it to tzitzis. And that's what he did. It took him a long time, and he worked together with chemists. And slowly, after I think it was like about a year or 2 years, he was finally able to produce this color of blue from the snail onto tzitzis, and from there it started the rest of the story, which we'll mitzvah continue.